This is In the Groove, the podcast where we get into the groove with my guests, who are some of the brightest minds in the mobile world. And today I have brought back what I thought was like the most mind-blowing presentation I've heard in a while. So today we get into the groove with Ayşen Kıratlı, Lead Growth Manager at Kwalee. Now, Ayşen, I don't know. I'll ask you. I think it's one of your first podcasts, isn't it?
It is literally my first podcast, yeah.
Okay. So I have uncovered a gem. This is even more exciting. Your first podcast and my first time really looking at creative and what is happening in testing and thinking and unpacking some surprising findings from your recent research. So as background, yes, Kwalee is a leading mobile games publisher, but you yourself, you have been, I think, leading the charge on creative testing in mobile gaming. What has been your impression since you had this amazing presentation?
Yeah. I mean, like, it was really amazing. And that was also like that presentation was my first presentation ever
Oh,
as
okay.
well. So it was really important for me to, hear what everyone else is experiencing about the creative testing. It was kind of like comforting to hear that most of the marketers are actually experiencing the same challenges. And we had a chance to discuss about what they did, like what kind of things they tested, what they found, like what are the things that worked for them and didn't work. So it was a great opportunity to like learn from each other.
So you had a presentation. It was the UA Society, and it's looking into creative testing. And if we're asking ourselves, why is this so important? It's because creative is the core of competitive advantage for gaming as well as non-gaming apps. Everybody wants to make certain that they're showing the right creative to the right audience and getting the right results. So this was what your experiment was about. And we talked about the impact. Yes, it was mind blowing. So yes, we will get to that in a moment. But I want to talk about how you got to that experiment. You examined testing of creatives across multiple networks. I mean, it's not something you just come up with. What led you to explore this in the first place?
Yeah. So unfortunately, multiple frustrations actually. Basically, like we've been using Facebook as our like primary creative testing network, and we realized that like over and over, like we are failing. Like we are not able to find the control creatives. We are not able to find like best performing creatives as much as we used to do. And even if we do, like even if we find some good performing creatives after those Facebook creative testings, when we actually add them to the SDK networks like Mintegral, Unity, Iron Source, like when we actually add them and try to see their performance, we realize that most of the time we are not even able to see a proper impression, proper spend goes up to those new creatives. There was one specific example that I think it was quite like shocking for us.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to find a good performing creative. We added to the networks, and we see that it actually scaled 150%. Like it helped us to scale 150%, which is amazing. Like
It is.
it's been some time. It's been some time that we like almost never see that kind of results, and we were quite excited. Like we thought that, oh my god, like we are gonna be in the top charts again. This was a like 3 years old or almost 4 years old game,
Mm-hmm.
and we realized that we are scaling quite nicely, and it is happening because of that one particular creative. Like we were really happy, but actually, that 150% scale uplift was only coming from one single network, and none of the other networks picked up that creative, meaning we were kind of left with our frustrations again because like there was only a performance uplift in one channel, and none of the other channels actually showed any interest to that creative, meaning their performance didn't change. So kinda like in the overall level, we had some good results, but it was not in our expectations. So in that moment, we realized that, okay, like we need to really deep dive into what is going on in every channel.
It just seems that it's really hard for some networks to pick up on new creatives. You know, if they're stuck on old creatives and the old performance and it's doing well, it's sort of like the way we say in America, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So it gets very, very hard to break in with new creatives. Is that what's going on here?
So I kind of feel like this is what's happening. Like networks don't actually want to take that risk. So they want to have like almost stable performance. Like they don't want to see like performance drops. So they are kind of focusing on the older creatives rather than like giving enough chance to a new creative to be able to see the performance. When we do this research about different networks, we checked what is the like percentage of the new creatives in every channel, like and we saw that Unity was the network that gives more opportunities to the new creatives than the other SDK networks that we were testing. And it's kind of not coincidence, I guess, that Unity is the only network that offers creative testing campaign type. So meaning in their algorithm, like they were actually testing this, like they were testing, like trying to give more enough opportunities to the new creatives. Like they were testing that, like pushing spans, pushing impressions to the new creatives more than the others. So it's kind of like both way. Maybe not. Maybe they don't want to take the risk, or maybe they don't have enough technological capacity yet to be able to actually do that.
It's interesting in a way because they're letting you test creatives, which is really helpful. That's a really important feature of Unity. But then again, it's like, yeah, test new creatives because we can test new creatives. So we'll show new creatives. So it sort of goes around in this cycle that feels very comfortable. But once you get outside of that, and outside of that, maybe Facebook, yeah, you're in other networks where it is really, really tough to make that first impression because they're not showing these new creatives. It just seems very counterintuitive. So, what do you think is going on behind the scenes here?
There might be some technological difficulties, or it might be the case that they don't want to take risks because, like, it is kind of understandable that, you know, like a lot is happening for the last couple of years. Like there are a lot of difficulties in accessing the data, and like with after that like scan issue, let's say, like we already saw that like most of the networks had trouble to adjust their algorithms to that change. So maybe it's why like it's taking so long. Maybe scan kind of interrupted some of the like developments. I don't know, but yeah, definitely there needs to be more improvements on the creative side, creative learning side, let's say.
So, we'll get to some other surprising results you had in this experiment, but just staying with this alone, the fact that new creatives can struggle to get the necessary traffic and then you struggle to get the necessary data, it's basically saying while you're testing, keep in mind that there are sort of built in limitations to what you can test, what you're going to get. Or maybe it's just as simple as monitor your networks and keep a good mix because some are going to show it and some are not.
I mean, so worth to say that the test that we did, or like our focus was on the SDK networks. Like we know that, for example, like testing a lot of creatives on TikTok is completely a different thing. Testing a lot of creatives on Facebook is completely a different thing. The problem that we have in general, I think, because like I was discussing this with a lot of peers as well, there is a problem about reliability of the results. Historically, like Facebook is the creative testing platform for most of the companies. There are multiple reasons about it. Like you can access like more data, like you can access more audience like related data. It's quite fast, it's quite cheap, and like you can see both social results, and also they have this audience network. You can kind of see both social and like network level performance in Mongo. And what we were doing, that we were just taking this data as it is, and we were hoping that this will translate in the same way into all the other channels.
Not happening.
But it's not happening. Like
Yeah.
it's not happening for a while, by the way. And we were trying to understand the reasons. Like, I don't know, to be honest, like in my whole career, I don't know like how many Facebook placement tests that I did, because like the first idea is always, oh, maybe like creatives are being shown in Facebook Reels, which is completely a different platform and different behavior than the like regular network performance. But we couldn't find that correlation. Like there were some cases, for example, that when a certain creative is shown in Facebook Reels and shows a good performance, it was also showing quite good performance in the SDK networks. The classic approach or classic way of thinking didn't work at all. So we try to understand how we can make the creative testing results as reliable as possible in everywhere, but we are kind of failing on that.
It's something along the lines of the truth is somewhere in the middle, is what it feels like
Yeah,
to me. Because it's this, it's that, but it's not. So it's somewhere in there. We're not off, but in an industry where everything matters, being off might have been okay before, but certainly is risky and something you want to be factoring in now more than
yeah,
ever, because every little bit, that incremental gain, everything matters.
exactly. I totally agree.
Ayşen, you also didn't just look at the networks, you looked at the results. And what was really, really mind blowing is we're hearing all the time test, test, test again, never stop testing. And so you get the feeling that if you stop testing, something bad will happen. But that wasn't necessarily the case in your research.
It was really, really a scary test, I must say, because in the history of Kwalee, there was no time that we didn't do any creative optimizations over than 3 weeks, let's say at most.
Okay.
Our regular optimization process was 2 weeks, but 3 weeks maybe sometimes in some cases.
Okay.
And but we realized that we were doing a lot of tests on Facebook and then on the SDK networks, and nothing was working. And as I said before, like there was quite a big frustration at the end. That's like, why nothing is working? Like, what might be the problem? And we started to talk about, I mean, we are doing all these things and
Mm,
it's not working. So what if we don't do nothing for a while and see what's gonna happen? As I said, like this was a thought, and this kind of started as a joke, by the way. But
mm.
then we kind of started to think, but yeah, I mean, what's gonna happen? Like, if we don't do anything, what's gonna happen? And it's kind of an intriguing thought, right?
Yeah, very
So
brave, by the way. Very brave. I mean, it started out as a joke. Did you ever say, "Oh no, I think this might be a risk we don't want to take"?
yeah,
It
yeah,
was like,
definitely. I mean, it was quite scary, and there was expectations were like we were gonna see some performance drops. But we said that, okay, like we are just gonna take the risk. And what we did is, for one of our biggest titles, we stopped creative optimizations for 6 weeks, meaning we didn't add any new creatives. And my expectation was, I can like clearly say that at least after third week, something is gonna happen, like we will start seeing bad performance. But that didn't happen. Especially on Android side, we literally didn't see any bad performance. Like almost everything was stable. The only change that was happening in the campaign performance was happening because of the seasonality, because we can confirm that with other games that we have. On iOS side, the only channel that started to perform badly was Unity. Again, Unity performance started to drop after the third week. Kind of was like, basically that was my expectation, but Unity iOS was only campaign or only like channel that kind of behaved in my expectations, and all of the other networks kind of didn't care about creative optimization at all.
I mean, that is so much what you're saying right there. We don't want to read too much into it, but we do want to say that, if you dread what will happen if you're not testing all the time, maybe it says you can think about adjusting the volume of testing because it's not about the volume, correct?
Exactly. Because as I said, we are coming from a hyper casual background, and especially in the past, like hyper casual is, in general, hyper casual is very fast paced. And our creative production and our creative mindset was also very fast paced. So we were thinking like, okay, we need to have lots of creatives. We need to test lots of creatives. We need to produce lots of creatives for that. And we need to refresh the creatives in a pace that most of the networks are suggesting, which most of the networks were suggesting bi-weekly creative refreshes back then. And we were kind of like trying to have the like same methodology, but as we talk, like we realized that it's not exactly working. And especially after this test, it was kind of a proof that the amount of creatives is not the solution, or is not something that we should pursue. It's the like quality of the creatives that we need to start think about.
I mean, you're moving from hyper casual to casual, so you're evolving. The company is exciting to watch in this evolution, and your thinking is also evolving. And maybe at some level, Ayşen, it's good to say we can reset and we can step back and do things that are strategic, because if you're not constantly thinking about creative testing and the volume and the pace, it should be possible to think through a creative testing strategy. So in a way, maybe this is a good thing for you, that you can
Yeah.
take that step back.
Yeah, definitely. Everything is changing in general in our industry. So in my presentation at VI Society, I kind of showed a page about how in 1 year each network's creative best practices are actually changed. So even this is a very good example that you can't stay same. So you need to adapt about the changes in the industry, in the networks itself. For example, what we were doing normally, we were focusing on the videos, because like videos were the creative type that was getting most of the attention, like most of the spans, impressions, etc. And like playables, we were kind of seeing some success, but we were focusing on the playables as end cards instead of like standalone playables that can like solely drive the installs.
Mm-hmm.
But with all the, of course, improvements with the networks or changes in the networks, now we are seeing that playables are actually taking like quite a big
Oh, yes.
span impression
Yes.
in general in our campaigns, which means that if we stay in this mindset about, okay, we need to test lots of videos, like then the impact will be not as much as we normally expected, right? Because it's actually changed right now. So you need to shift your focus towards playables. Like you need to find a way to improve your playable performance rather than focusing on a lot of video production.
And finally, there's a question, and maybe you can give me a thinking, a framework behind this, because it becomes a question when to test and when to let the algorithms just do their thing. What do you draw on? What do you think of to make that decision?
The thing about testing, you need to know or you need to understand what you need to test. Or let me just try to give some example.
Okay.
So you have a game, and you see that like mostly playables are taking most of the spans and volume, and videos are not actually performing that well.
Right.
So in this case, you have different options. One thing is that you can focus on what is working. So you know that playables are working. So you can shift all your focus to the playable production and try to like produce as much as playables as possible. Or you can try to fix what is not working. So videos are not working for you. Then you need to have a real shift, like a big shift in your video production, video strategy, and you can try to improve what you are not good at. Of course, for example, like producing a video is not as the same cost as producing a playable. So these are also like coming with those decisions that you can take. But the first thing that you need to understand is what is happening in general. Like, for example, we didn't actually know that much that Mintegral is favoring the older creatives rather than the new creatives. So when we were taking the creative decisions, we were not necessarily saying that, okay, this game is very big on Mintegral, so creative impact is lower than a game that is big on Iron Source, for example. But now we are able to say that. Now we are able to shift our focus to where we can make an impact.
There's a lot in that, Ayşen, if you think about it, because it is that. It's about the focus. So if you're looking at the creative itself, the format, and you're saying, well, video alone isn't working, rethink it, look, shift attention to playables or what works for your audience. And the same thing with the networks themselves. They're treating creatives differently, and what works on one might not work on the other. And as you said yourself, Integral, at least at the time you did your experiment, appeared to favor older creatives. So you need to understand that. It's not saying one or the other. It's just understand this as you build your strategy, because ultimately you have to adapt. How do you adapt your creative strategy now that you know this for each network?
We learned a lot and we started to change our strategy a lot. As I said, for example, in the past, we were not necessarily paying enough attention, like where most of the spend goes to. And now we know that, for example, most of the spend goes to Mintegral, but creative impact is way lower in there. Then let's shift our focus to a different game that we know that we can make a difference. It doesn't mean that we will not do anything on the games that is big on Mintegral. That means that we are gonna adjust our priorities, because adjusting the priorities, adjusting your budget and effort is one of the most important things actually right now in the industry that you need to do. If you keep trying to spend on the things that will make less impact, then it will affect you in the end, right? So, and Kwalee has lots of games, and I love it because I'm able to see all the different genres and all the different behaviors in different games. And that's like one of the things that everyone need to be aware of. Like every game behaves differently, every network behaves differently. So you need to understand like what is working for you and what is not.
It's about the audience. It's also about the results. And since you're doing this all the time, I'd love to hear you weigh in on what you need to factor in when you're looking at your winning creative, because there are people who say, no, just look at CPI. Others are like, no, ROAS. Others are retention. It's an ongoing debate. I don't expect the answer, but I would love to understand more of what you're looking at when you're trying to assess the value of the creative.
Like it is great that I don't know the answer because that's why I keep trying to find the answer.
Okay.
Um, but so there are a couple of things actually, and there are a couple of reasons why this is a debate.
Mm-hmm.
Because every game behaves differently again, and even though like sometimes we uh, kind of forget, I think, because I know that like when we were working only on the hyper casual games,
Mm-hmm.
um, like we kind of had a certain understanding about like what is working, what is not working, and like what we need to check. But then it started to change because our strategy also started to change.
Oh.
Um, Previously, we were mostly checking CPI and IPM. So IPM, I would say, by the way, like IPM is the best metric that shows you whether your creative is scalable enough or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely say IPM in the in on the marketing side of the metrics. It's a great metric to look at. Of course, like CPI as well. It's always good to like acquire users as in a cheaper way as possible. But there is other side of the equation. Like you can bring lots of users to your game, but if they don't like your game or if they don't want to stay on your game, then you wouldn't gain anything. So that's why ROAS, we always check ROAS at the end. So what is good and what is not? The answer is always check out the ROAS.
I get the feeling, Ayşen, after seeing you and just chatting with you here, this is part of what's in your DNA as well. You love to try new things and to find new things. And speaking of that, is your findings themselves. So I saw a lot of conversations around it. People came up to me afterwards after hearing you, and we were talking about you. So even though you weren't there, we were like, wow, what did she say? And what did she mean? So what has been the impact within Kwalee, benefiting or building on your findings? What's going on there in creative testing? What's maybe next?
That's one of the reasons that I'm glad that like I did this test and we had those findings because it changed a lot of things on our side. So as I mentioned that we were kind of feeling like all this like because of this hyper casual background, like we need to test a lot of creatives and like we need to do this, we need to do that, and then we realized that actually we don't need to. So we drastically reduced the number of videos that we are producing, and we changed our strategy into testing something with a clear strategy and with a high production instead. We also changed our strategy to like we are trying to prioritize our like creative workload in a way that we can make a difference. So we had a proper separation into the different games, and we kind of build a strategy behind every game. That's like, for example, for one game, maybe everything is going great and we don't need actually a big production, then we are doing that. But for a certain game that we know that we want to grow this game, like, and that needs proper attention, so we focus on that game and start working on very crazy ideas now. The other thing is that, as I mentioned, I kind of talk about playables a lot today, but it's kind of like everyone is talking about it, and we are seeing it as well. We were trying to shift our focus to playables. We have our internal playable team. But what we are doing now, I think it is really great that they are doing it. We are trying to improve the speed of the production on the playable side. And they started to work on a certain template that will allow us to use the best performing videos and transform this to the playables in a way that like we can make certain differences in like very fast. So it will improve our production of the playables. Like it will be easier. It will be very quick. And it will help us a lot because as I mentioned before, playable production is very costly. And we were trying to do that internally, and we were trying to improve our process. But now with all these improvements, I think it will help us a lot.
And you reach these improvements because you're able to focus your efforts and your resources. And then you can adapt, you can innovate. You said yourself, you have this template approach to taking a video, making a playable out of it. I'm sure people will want to understand how you do that, but I'm sure that's your secret sauce. But you can take time and some distance from the constant testing, the constant thinking to think, how do we want to test? What do we want to test? What do we need to adapt? And just do it with more strategy, more thoughtfulness. And that, I think, is a perfect place to get back to you, Ayşen, because everyone is more than a title. And you are thoughtful. You are thinking. You are delving into this area. But you also have an interesting career journey overall because you went from non-gaming to gaming, right? Commerce,
Yeah.
gaming, and those skills are so important. I'm hearing so much more about how much we can learn from non-gaming apps in the gaming space. And here you are, your current role at Kwalee. From being in a commerce company, you have certainly been able to adapt and innovate. What do you draw on that? What skills have you drawn on or made relevant in this journey, in this transition?
To be perfectly honest, I think moving from e-commerce to gaming or moving from anything to gaming is like one of the best things that I did. Like I'm really happy to be in this industry. Like gaming is amazing. But when you think about performance marketing perspective, it's not that different because you are still trying to optimize your profits. You are trying to optimize your ROAS. You are trying to make like strategical decisions on your campaign management. But what changed for me and what I had to educate myself enough, what I had to like put enough attention is to understand what my audience is. Because shopping is a little bit intuitive. I'm not sure if it's the right word, but it's like you kind of understand what you need and like what people need, and it's kind of easier to impact or affect people.
Yeah.
But when it comes to gaming, there are really different motivations on gaming. Like every game that you work, you need to focus on different player motivations. You need to understand what people want, why people are coming to this game, why people are staying in this game, what you can do to improve this. And this is very tied with the creativity itself. I think gaming is the best industry when it comes to creativity, let's say. So you can really impact, like you can have a very big difference with the way that you are building your creative strategy. Like that was really important for me, and that was also challenging. But that's what keeps me motivated, like there's always something to test. There's always something to learn.
You like to be stimulated. I think you're one of these types, as you said yourself, there's always something to do, always something to test, always some new territory. And your colleagues call you out on this as well. They say that you're very brave and you love to try new things. And that's quite different because talking with you, you're not the typical sort of loud and proud person here. It's a sense of inner strength, but that personal bravery, it has to come from somewhere, to take a risk, to push the envelope here. What is it that you draw on there? Because you might not be the loudest in the room, perhaps, Ayşen. Maybe you will as you develop in your career, but you don't have to be. You don't have to be. And
Yeah.
that's something special.
To be honest, like I kind of feel like this is gonna sound cheesy, but I kind of feel like failure is one of the, best teachers in general. Like I think we learn a lot on the things that is not going well. So like that's what motivates me. Like I know that I can learn something new anytime I try something. And one of the reasons why I kind of developed this attitude maybe is because of the industry itself, because it's constantly changing. Like in some way it's amazing. In some way it's a little bit tiring. I can understand that. But it's really changing all the time. What works today is not working today. And what works for one game is probably not gonna work for another game. So that means you need to always doubt about yourself, and you need to always ask the question: okay, is this gonna work, or is this not gonna work? Should we test it to learn? Like we are growth managers. I'm a growth manager, and like I think the only way to grow something is to take the risk and to test, basically. So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I'm trying to enforce also to other people. Just try.
And that's quite the opposite of some people. Some people say sort of stuck, or they've had one great success and think that's it. That's all I need to do. But you adapt. I just want to leave with a piece of advice from you for other people, maybe even potentially most times women, even trying to find that same courage in themselves to say, okay, I'm going to take risks. I'm going to push for innovative solutions. I mean, it was your idea to do the experiment that you did. And look what you've done. You've opened up a new area, a new way of thinking, a new perspective at Kwalee. Yes, it's a team, not you alone, but someone has to take that first step. You took that first step. What do you say to others so that they take their first step?
You actually said what I wanted to say.
Oh my goodness.
It's
Lovely.
starts.
Wavelength.
It really starts with accepting that you can't know everything. And if you are saying that you know everything, then there's something wrong. Because as I said, this industry is not like that. So there is no way that you can know everything because it's constantly changing, and you need to constantly adapt yourself. And you need to like start accepting that maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I don't know this. So I need to know. I need to like prove that. So probably that's the advice that I would say. Like it kind of starts accepting that it is okay to not know everything. You can't know everything. You need to test and you need to adapt yourself.
Particularly in these times where everything is changing so rapidly, so completely. And I have to say, it was completely a delight having you here, Ayşen. I'm almost privileged that you chose. This is your first podcast. Here you are. You were with me. I can say I knew you way back when. And I'm sure there's going to be many, many podcasts and speaking engagements from here on because you're made for it. You're slightly humble, which is refreshing in this industry, but that's just it. You have so much to say for people who unlock you. And I want to do that. I want to make certain that you connect with others in the industry. Does it just find you on LinkedIn, or do you have a preference?
Yeah, definitely. LinkedIn is perfect. And I really love connecting with people. I'm trying to be as much as available around the conference times, and especially any conference in Istanbul. Please come find me. I usually attend the Istanbul conferences, so I really love to connect with everyone.
That means I'll be running into you, because not only will I'll see you probably at 2 conferences, because I'll be at Moby Dictum, which is in your backyard. Am
Amazing.
I correct?
Yes, exactly. I'll be
Oh, that
there
is
as
cool.
well.
That is lovely. And I had such a great time. It was my first time in Istanbul, and I'm like, this is it. I'm coming back more often. Yes, it was a joy chatting with you too. And I'm sure our paths will cross again. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Lovely. And of course, you, my audience, thank you so much, because you have taken the time to tune in. And if you want to learn more, connect, find out more about Ayşen, find out more about In the Groove, come to In the Groove. Well, spread the word, tell your tribe, like the show, subscribe to the channel. All of that would be amazing. And thank you for tuning in. And of course, if you're tuning into In the Groove on YouTube, well, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. It will allow you to stay up to date with the series, and not only that, enjoy the pure gold of knowledge and insights our guests bring to every episode.